You're listening to A Sculpted Life podcast, brought to you by Pal Tiya International. Interviews with creatives around the globe. Our sculpting material, Pal Tiya Premium, is the all-weather sculpting material. Add water, knead like dough, sculpt it. Make art for your garden. No firing, no molds, no kidding.
So, I'm here with Kim Beaton, the co-founder and creative director of Pal Tiya International. Hello, Kim.
Hello.
I love the way she says hello. So, we are going to have a little chat about the business and also more about Kim's life as a sculptor and what she was doing before and how she got into the whole sculpting world, what she's used in the past, and just a little bit about what inspires her as a creator. So Kim, just give us a little bit of a background of what was it like when you were young?
When I was young, I had what I would consider the most perfect childhood imaginable. I was one of those very, very lucky people to have grown up in Montana. My father was a lumberjack. My mom was a housewife, and she pretty much raised us 4 kids. And we lived in the backwoods of Montana, a little tiny hometown of 1,000 people called Superior, Montana. And we had access to hundreds of mountain lakes that you could hike into, the back forests, the reach, the old growth forests.
Okay.
Yeah. So my dad was a lumberjack the whole time that he worked there in Montana. And us kids helped him get cordwood. So I worked with my dad, as the rest of us kids did, there, and it was the perfect childhood.
Excellent. So when you were young, did you ever think you'd be doing what you're doing now? And
No.
we won't reveal her age, but did you ever think?
No, I didn't. I really felt that I was going to get myself a nice, steady job and do that. I love to work, whatever that work is, whether I'm a barista, whether I'm digging ditches, it doesn't matter. I like to work, and I bring to that job a certain amount of energy because I'm the one who's doing it. So most of my career, my young career, 12 years, I was a housekeeper. I was a maid. I cleaned the richest homes of Seattle for more than a decade, and I loved that job.
And how old were you when you moved to Seattle?
Oh, wow. 23, I think?
Mm-hmm. And you started your business, was it your business?
Yeah, started a little business doing that.
Excellent.
And I loved the job. It paid marvelously well, and I had every intention of keeping that job until I retired. But I got injured, and I had to choose a different career path.
How were you injured?
I got bursitis in my left hip, and I started to get a limp, and I decided that I could really make that a lot worse by keeping that job, or I could step away from it before it got too bad.
Sounds like a plan. So when you realized that this was something that was going to stop you doing what you were doing, how did you, what happened then? Explain to us what happened then.
Well, while I was a housekeeper, I put my husband of the time, Hank Graham, through college. And he graduated summa cum laude. I am so proud of him still. He is a marvelous man. He got a degree in electrical engineering, and by that point, not only had he graduated, but he'd gotten an excellent job and was working all over the world at that point. And when I was injured, he said, "Hey, you can now pursue whatever education you want to do."
Wow.
And so I was able to quit my job, and then I had to discover what I was going to go to school for, and I never found it.
Oh, how come?
Directionless, aimless. I had every intention of keeping that housekeeping job till I died. I didn't have greater aspirations than that job, but I was self-employed. I was making a lot of money. My clients loved me. I had a great dialogue with all the people I worked with. what's not to love? But when I stepped away from that, I had the opportunity to become anything, and I had no concept of what that was going to look like. So I rattled around for a couple of years, and I tried lots of things. I thought, oh, let's try being an artist. Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
And had you ever been arty before that point?
I'd always kind of sculpted. I'm that kind of kid who sculpted the mashed potatoes at the table.
Okay.
Like, man, you should see my sandcastles par excellence, I tell you. But I never thought of it as like a real living or anything.
Yeah.
Other friends of mine had gone on down that route, and I thought, wow, painting, let's try that. And I realized so many artists had gone down the painting route that there was not going to be anything I could contribute to that venue that 100 other people hadn't already brought to the game. But very few people were doing sculpture. There's a good reason for that. Sculpting, any kind of sculpting, is howlingly expensive to do.
Right. Yeah.
You just, once you go down that route, I often joke with my students, no, really, heroin is cheaper. Because learning to sculpt, learning to do the armatures, getting the anatomy right, learning molds, casting, all of that is dangerously expensive. But it's also compelling. A person can see a painting and it's 2D and it hangs on the wall, but when it's 3-dimensional, it is more in the room with you. And I found that enticing. So I decided, probably against good sense and rationality, that I would pursue being a sculptor. But I made the decision to be a sculptor no matter how hard it was, rather than flicker in and out of it. It was decide to do it, get on the bus or not. And so when I set my feet on that path, I was going to make it work.
So explain to me, let's back up a little bit, and you decided to be a sculptor. Was there someone who inspired you to work, or was it simply just, this is what I want to do now and I'm going to start doing it?
There are a couple of people whose art totally inspired me. Anne McCaffrey's Dragon series. I wanted my own dragon. I mean, one of those. Wouldn't you love to ride one of those around? And the works of Brian Froud.
Okay.
I adored and still do adore Brian Froud's work to this day. And in fact, it was this compelling desire to have his work and his style of creatures poking in and around my own gardens and in the forests where I grew up. They just look like they ought to exist. And I wanted to make them exist, but not as a painting, but as real things. And so a lot of my early work, most of it, was a copy of Brian Froud's work.
Right. Okay, good. And he does, sorry, forgive me for my ignorance, but he is fairies?
Yes. He does the best, most lovingly realistic fairies there are. He's been doing this decades. You would know him from Labyrinth and The Dark Crystal. He was the artist that put his stamp on those two films.
So you were inspired by those two people, and what did you decide on a medium that you were going to start exploring, or was it simply a case of try lots of things and decide what you like?
A lot of it is try what you can get your hands on. When we started out, all I could do was plasticine. And while you can get the best textures in plasticine out there, you don't get a finished product. You then have to put that in a mold and make a casting, which are two other additional layers of technology on top of that. And each of those is expensive, but it means you can make copies of your work. So once I started going down the route of let's make 3D, okay, let's make permanent 3D, let's make permanent saleable 3D. And it just goes and gets a lot more complex after that point.
So did you decide to do this all on your own, or was there, I could go to art school for this, or...
The stuff I wanted to do was fantasy and dragons and the Brian Froud look. there wasn't a school that was going to show me that exclusively. Yes,
Okay.
I could have gone to school and learned the basics of sculpting, but I would have spent a year before I got into the juicy stuff, getting
Yeah.
into the anatomy and just the fine bone delicacy of those figures. So I decided to start at the end and just make them and then backwards figure out whatever it would take to both make copies of them and ultimately make them saleable.
Okay. And what happened next?
I didn't make any money.
You always come out with things that make me laugh. Okay, so you didn't make any money and you thought, this blows?
No, that just kept me in there.
Okay.
I decided, nope, I'm not going to stop. And so I continued to make them. I got involved with a museum exhibit, Raptors to Rex, that toured the United States for a while. I produced 3 large dinosaur recreations for them.
Wow.
And that got me within the sights of Wizards of the Coast, who were out in Renton. I was living in Seattle at the time, and they thought, this gal can create a sculpture. Virtually all the rest of the artists at that time were painters. I was maybe one of 2 other sculptors, and they wanted me to come in and do some work for them, which I was able to do. They wanted a sculpture in 2 weeks, and I turned it around in 2 days.
And what did you use?
At that time, Sculpey.
Okay.
Sculpey is a marvelous polymer clay that you're able to bake in your own oven.
Yeah.
You're capable of making lovely, small, up to about a foot tall pieces that you have perfect detail in. It's too expensive and too fragile to go large, but you can sculpt it and get a hardened finish.
So when you first started out, how big would you say your average sculpture was?
Oh, well, one of my first sculptures was about 4 feet high. And
Okay.
I literally...
So starting small then.
I wanted a dragon.
You were always big from the start, weren't you? You thought big.
When I think of the fantastical creations, I always wanted to own a dragon, like a pet, that, size of a small Great Dane. And I built it originally in tinfoil and I covered it with paper mache and then in plasticine. And I sculpted a really stunning surface on it. But then it was too expensive to put into molds. At the time, this is back in the 1980s, 1986, it would have cost me, I don't know, a couple of $1,000 to put that in a mold.
Okay.
And just didn't have it on hand.
Yeah.
Never stopped me from wanting to do that, but the materials did stop me. So I could sculpt in clay and then not do anything with it. Now, working for Wizard of the Coast, one of the first things they wanted from me was a dragon with a 23-foot wingspan.
Okay. Not
I
asking
went-
for much.
The largest piece I'd built up to then was 4 feet high.
Okay. So what did you do?
Just built it.
Just built it.
Literally, I had this lovely friend, Denny Hartung. He is a welder who was one of head of props for the Seattle Repertory Theater. And I called him up and said, Denny, I need to learn to weld this weekend. So if I pay you money, can you give me a starter course? And he said, sure. So we went out Friday and we bought all the gear. And Saturday and Sunday, I sat back and welded a 1/4 mile worth of bead. And at the end, it was okay, we're good.
We got it.
We got it. And once I could do that, I could build the steel armature for the dragon. And
Jeez.
after that, it was tinfoil that up, put a layer of clay, and put that thing into molds. Oh my God, that was staggeringly expensive. But they made 3 of them. And this dragon, called Mitzi, is still in their front corporate office's lobby.
Ah, have you ever been back to see it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, good.
And yes, Mitzi does have a tattoo on her shoulder. My older brother came to visit me while it was in the clay stage. And he said, Kim, why are all of your sculptures these really, really buff biker kind of dude dragons? And I said, really? Well, I suppose they need a tattoo. And when I stepped out of the room, he carved a tattoo on the shoulder of the dragon that was a heart with an arrow going through it and Mom in the middle. And I came back, saw that, and went, my brother is too cool. And it's still there. Check it out.
Check it out, people, if you are in the Seattle area. Okay, so you basically self-taught, and you continued to. Did it take a while for you to get the anatomy right? How long did that take?
Learning anatomy by yourself is a long, arduous process, and it took me about 2 years to be able to produce an écorché. An écorché is a flayed figure, where it's a human figure, it just doesn't have any skin on it, but it shows every muscle, tendon, and bone on that surface. Once you've been able to build an écorché, it means you have a command of anatomy and then can start doing really cool things with it, stretching it, elongating it. The Hulk is not a normal human figure, but someone who has a command of human anatomy can stretch and distort human anatomy to fit that new form. And I found stepping into the fantasy field a lot more engaging than doing another horse.
So fast forward, you continued to keep doing this. You continued to get commissions, I guess.
No, Wizards of the Coast hired me after I made the dragon. They gave me employment for 3.5 years as their lead large sculptor. And I then continued to produce very large life-size human figures, large props for their retail outlets and then for their shows, their exhibits.
Okay.
And it's through them that I started to do the very large performance art sculpting. And that's the stuff that I found I liked the most. And performance art sculpting, you've seen versions of it with sand sculptors who come in with, say, 7 or 9 tons of sand, pack it in the middle of a shopping mall, and then carve away castles and amazing things. I wanted to do that, but I'm an additive sculptor, which means I build up. I don't carve down like granite you carve down, sand you carve, wood you carve. I'm a clay sculptor. I build upward. I'm additive. And
it's a whole different thing when you look at someone who can see something in a lump of wood.
I cannot see a thing in a block of wood but grain.
So
just nothing.
Anyone listening who does that, we absolutely bow down to you because it must be so much more difficult, I believe. But anyway.
To my mind, I can't do it. I really admire wood carvers and stone carvers because you really can't make a lot of mistakes. You have got to get that right. And being additive, okay, there's lots of room for error that I can then recover from. But performance art sculpting is I would bring in between 1/2 and 1 ton of clay into a convention, say Gen Con or San Diego Comic-Con, lay out a massive tarp, bring in an armature, and then make a sculpture out of clay over that armature in the 3 to 4 days of the convention. How to do this? By grabbing any passerby who's willing to step onto that tarp, hand them a tool and say, "You too can become a sculptor, trust me." And I could pull 15 people a day up onto the sculpture who'd never sculpted before at all and show them what they needed to do to produce the quality of work I require.
Great. So you were teaching other people from a very early stage in your sculpting career.
Oh yeah, and it's as much that you just want to share the experience. Sculpting alone is, well, kind of lonely. You can, but if I make a big enough sculpture, I have to get 4 or 5 of my best friends in. Get some pizza, get a bunch of coffee, drink some Red Bull, whatever it takes. But you really get into a groove. You're jamming just like people in a band do. And I'm in sculpting now for that exhilarating experience of doing it with your friends.
Wow. So after that, so you were employed by these guys for 3 years. And then what happened then?
What happened then?
Wait a minute. What happened?
I left Wizards of the Coast, continued to make large sculptures, learned ceramics at that point, spent a couple of years teaching myself ceramics because having done welded steel pieces, done very large sculptures, all of them were fiberglass. All of them required molds and casting, which is nothing short of howlingly expensive. And I like to do big, but I want to not have to need an entire wood welding and plastics shop to do it. I just want it big. So I began the search for how big can I go and do it completely non-toxic. Any of your listeners may have seen my tree troll, which was a 10-foot tall paper mache Ent from Lord of the Rings. That piece was my seminal piece. I got big, I got beautiful, I got 23 people to help me build it, and it was that electric, fun endeavor that you remember as the best of times. And I wanted to repeat that. But I needed a new material because, well, paper mache is not going outside. So I began...
And that would be a very big kiln.
Mammoth. And I decided that I wanted to find a material that did that. And I never did.
Okay, so when you made that, and then tell us about how are you in New Zealand? How did that happen?
I had gotten word that the Hobbit films were going to be made. And I thought, whoo, I like The Lord of the Rings. I'd sure like to work with those guys. I watched all the extras, every frame of those extras. And I thought, okay, those people over there seem pretty cool. Let's go do that. And I sent my portfolio out to Weta. And they wrote me back immediately, said, sorry, we don't have any jobs for you. And what I had been told is that if you wish to get into Weta Workshop in Wellington, New Zealand, you have to keep applying because they have so many people who wish to work for them.
Oh, I bet.
And they told me no, and I went, okay, well, I tried.
Tick that one off.
Tick that one off the list. When they say no, I figured it was no. And I continued to research new materials. And 2 years later, out of the blue, I got a call personally from Richard Taylor who said, we've held on to your portfolio for 2 years. We like your work. How'd you like to come on down? And I went, you like totally?
Yeah.
Yes, I would be more than happy. I mean, I stopped breathing there for about 2.5 minutes, but I thought that would be marvelous.
Because you had probably just written it off and thought,
I'd written it off.
Yeah.
I figured there was going to be so many thousands of artists beating down the door to get into those rare jobs that I didn't stand a chance. It was a complete surprise to me that they'd kept my portfolio.
And what were you doing at the time when you got that call?
I was working for a company called Simulab, and what they do is they create lifelike human organs, body parts, cadavers, so that medical students have a chance to practice on things that aren't real people.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to know what the tendons do around the kneecap or how the web of tendons hold the shoulder against the rib cage, I was creating versions of that with various types of plastics, rubbers, silicons, you name it.
So you've worked with pretty much most sculpting materials, would you say?
I haven't found any yet that I have not yet experienced. So, odd way of saying, if there is a sculpting material on planet Earth, I have probably worked with it because I have hunted all of them down. I've set snares all around the world. I've captured all of them and then spent a lot of time doing them. Spent a year on bronze, 2 years on ceramics, 7 years on fiberglass and carbon fiber. I actually worked for the U.S. military briefly creating armor for the troops in Iraq because I had experience both with the Society for Creative Anachronisms and how to build armor and carbon fiber technology.
I did not know that you did that. That's something I did not know about you.
None of my designs worked, but we were able to determine that they weren't going to work fast enough that it was of value. Knowing what not to do is as valuable as knowing what to do. And they had a whole bunch of ideas, and I rapidly built them and said, no, 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 no. Don't do that. Okay, thank you. And they paid. It was marvelous.
Great, great. So, circling back to Sir Richard Taylor phoning you and saying, hey, come on down. Did you just leave everything and go?
I was able to finish off the commissions that I had. It took me about 3 months to finish all the obligations and close down the work that I had in Seattle to go over.
Right, right. And you arrived and just walked in. What was your first experience of doing something like that?
I got lost. If you have ever been inside Weta Workshop. Weta Workshop is a great deal like Hogwarts because the walls move. The doorways change on a regular basis because their building there are rooms for welding. There are rooms for costume and metalworking and casting. But depending on the use that room is to the present project, okay, so we're doing Lord of the Rings. That room over there is now armory. Well, we're finished with the armory, cut the wall, move the door, shift that over here. I literally got lost in Weta Workshop for 3 days running before I could finally find my way to the front door.
I'm stuck inside. I know you like my work, but for goodness sake, let me go home. And so you started working... I know that some people in there are, well, obviously they're all under NDAs and things like that and can't talk about what they were working on, but was it something exciting?
I walked right into the sculpting room and I had a chance to meet some sculptors of extraordinary skill. Jamie Biswarrick is off the charts beautiful work. Daniel Cockersell for his super fine work. It was intimidating being around these guys because, yes, I'm a sculptor, but I haven't spent that much time sculpting. I've spent more time learning the technology to make the sculptures work. So if you took my 20 years of sculpting and you truly compressed it down, you're going to get about 6 or 7 years of sculpting, and all the rest is the tech behind it, learning molds and casting.
But do you not think that's the same with any sculpture?
If you're at Weta, those sculptors have
serious experience.
They've got 15, 20, 25 years, and the work they produce is stratospherically good. I have the luck in that while most of those sculptors will happily take on a project 2 or 3 feet high, I'll happily take on one that's 10 on my own. I don't need a client to make something that size.
So did you learn from them?
I learned that I was intimidated. Whoa, you guys are good. So yes, that was one of the best parts. Is there were a number of textures that Weta had been able to produce on its collectibles lines that I had been looking at for years and was like, how did they do that? Oh my God. And to actually talk with the artists who were producing those pieces at the time and see them use a specialized series of tools that they had hand built for those purposes. It was truly the backdoor Masonic handshake kind of ninja techniques that I had been hoping for all of my life.
So really it was a win-win. You had a new job and you were learning from some of the best sculptors in the world.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was incredible.
And so fast forward to when you met your lovely husband who also worked at Weta, and he is from Australia.
Yes.
So tell me how that happened. How did you guys get together? I love hearing the story, but tell everyone else.
I will preface this by, I was married to my first husband for 20 years, and I had split ways with him. He is still a close personal friend. I do admire Hank. He's still one of the smartest men I will ever know in my life. He is one of the best, highest end computer geeks there are in the world. But I decided to pursue a life of art. He decided to pursue a life of computers.
Yeah.
And I had been separated from him for 4 years before going to Weta Workshop.
Yeah.
And the second day that I was there, I met my husband.
While you were being lost, or
You bet. Of course.
banging into each other in the hallway.
So literally, I was walking the halls in a set of digitigrade leg extensions that I had developed over a couple of years. And that makes me about 7.5 feet high. And I was walking through the halls, sort of introducing the other special effects technicians to the stuff that I had discovered. And it was really quite a lot of fun. And I'm striding through here, and along comes one of the most heart-stoppingly handsome men walks down the hall toward me, and it's like, woo! And he looks at me and goes, wow, great legs. And continues on his way.
Of course he did. I can just see him doing that.
Heart-stoppingly handsome guy.
Yeah. And the rest is...
The rest is history. What happened is, when you are invited to work for Weta Workshop, if you are an international import or a guest, Richard Taylor has a small cottage that he allows you to stay in for 2 or 3 weeks, because an international guest is going to have to do a lot of things like get a bank account, get a phone,
that old chestnut.
get a car, find an apartment, and you can't do that instantly.
It's hard.
And you cannot do that living in a hotel room.
No, you cannot.
So he provides a series of small cottages for us international guests for about 2 or 3 weeks to get our feet on the ground for that purpose. And my husband, Warren Beaton, is one of his closest personal friends. And so Warren had come over a couple weeks earlier and was staying at one of the guest cottages. And I was invited to stay with 2 other people in the same cottage. It's like camping out, really.
So fate completely pushed you guys together.
Yes, it was. No, I honestly think that was Richard and Tanya. I think they knew exactly what they were doing. Yes, they did.
These guys.
So to give you a very brief description of what my husband is like, if you have ever seen the film Back to the Future, there is Doc Brown. Great Scott! If we had 1.3 gigawatts!
That is Warren.
I married that man. I married a brilliant, exciting, just thoughtful, creative, funny man.
Wickedly smart man.
Wickedly smart man.
Wickedly smart, yeah. And so your first projects, you were there, you were sculpting, you were learning all these things, and you started working on the Hobbit films? Or
was that
directly.
One of your first projects? I literally walked in the first day.
You're allowed to say that? You're allowed to say that?
Yes, it's been 8 years.
Yeah, okay, good.
I came in, I had 1 day to be introduced by Richard to all the people that were there. There were about 50 people who'd come on and were presently occupying all the different departments. And I was brought through, told all their names, and then the next day I began work. So you launch fast. And I began sculpting rock trolls. And I stayed in the sculpting room for quite a few months until we got to the goblins, the kind of pustulant underground goblin creatures from the Goblin King, and I found those so icky to sculpt. I moved to Armory. I was like, I think, having been with the SCA for a better part of 10 years in Seattle, I knew about armor. I had built my own specialized armor, and so I could slip into that field. So I stepped off to the side and ended up doing that most of the time on The Hobbit.
Right. Excellent. And so then there came a time when you realized that you liked large sculptures, you wanted to continue doing them, and a lot of the materials that you and Warren were using were quite toxic to you. How did it come up in conversation? I mean, I envision Kim and Warren sitting in bed on a Saturday morning saying, "What do you want to invent today? What do we develop today?" And so you asked Warren if he would... How did that come up in conversation? Did you just ask him Or did you just say, look, I need something that I can sculpt in, and I need to go large, and I need it not to have to go in a kiln?
It was more that I had spent 3.5 years on The Hobbit, and I wanted to do something else.
Yeah.
I have worked in the film industry, and while it's fun, I wish to be a sculptor, not necessarily a sculptor for film.
Okay.
And I really, truly like working on large personal pieces. Something about the size of a car. That's really nice. You just can't do it if you're doing it on your own. I built that large seminal piece, the tree troll, and I wanted to do that again. But I didn't want it to be in fiberglass. I didn't want it to be in steel reinforced concrete because that stuff's heavy. The fiberglass is too toxic. Paper mache won't go outside. Epoxies are toxic in those quantities. And I was faced with maybe I shouldn't be a sculptor at all. It's just too hard, too expensive, and it can be soul destroying when you can't get your work done. Ceramics won't go large enough. Glass is the wrong material. I don't want to be a subtractive sculptor. I don't want to work in bronze. That's too expensive. And every existing material out there just stopped me from doing the pieces I want. And I was honestly having a bitch fest with my husband going, why isn't there something that would do this? He created the goo that Keanu Reeves came out of in The Matrix. He created all the weird plastics and elastomers for a lot of the scenes in Lord of the Rings. He did Shelob's web. He came up with the Uruk-hai birthing sac materials. He works with bizarre chemistry. And he said, well, let me think about that. And over the coming months, he began a series of tests and experiments. And he'd come in every couple of weeks and give me a material and say, what do you think of this? And I'd say, nah, it's kind of sticky. This one, flops over. Nah, that's not going to work. And he'd just go back downstairs into the shop and continue to build something. And it took him 14 months of research. And I can remember the day when he said, hey, Kim, try this. And he put this softened clay-like material into my hands, and it just moved like silk. And I went, you've got it. And at that point, I realized I could continue to be a sculptor. And the plan from then forward was I was going to build really big, beautiful dragons. Of course, dragons.
Of course, dragons.
I'm going to build these things. And now I can build them so affordably. I have a career path. This is going to be fabulous. And I set about now sequentially building larger and larger and larger pieces. How big can I go and not have any steel at all in this? And we topped out at about 3 tons. And it was only after we'd gotten those big pieces that we thought, hey, maybe we should share this. The other sculptors who helped me build these big projects, they were all like, hey, can we have some of this material? Yeah, sure, I'll give you some. And then I met up with Richard Anderson, and Yvonne here. And it was Richard's idea to make it available to other artists. So that was news.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it was such a, you were doing such amazing things with it. And I remember when I lived in New Zealand, I remember coming round and having a play with it. And I walked home that day and I felt, I've just experienced something really special. I hadn't thought about anything for 90 minutes or something since I was there. I was creating just this, Kim was brilliant, very patient with me, who was completely stupid when it came to any anatomy, even though I'm an ex-nurse. I shouldn't really say that. But you forget that when you stop nursing after a while. You don't want to remember the anatomy, believe me. But, it was a 90 minutes of absolute just complete mindfulness. And I remember thinking, wow, this stuff, people would love this stuff, especially for art therapy, and it's just such a lovely medium to work with. So that's my first memories of using it, was in Kim's workshop down in her basement, just playing with it and watching what she was doing and thinking, wow, this is incredible. I don't even think Richard had a go with it, Richard Anderson.
No,
I don't think he'd had a go with it. He was just like, if you love it and you're this geeked out about it, other people are going to be geeked out about it. And we thought, why not? Let's try it. And it was, it just went and grew from there, and it's just kept growing. And I think the more that we put into this business and the more passion that we have for it, we're seeing that in other people now. And that must just be the most amazing thing for Warren and Kim to see, is that something that they developed in their work, well, he developed in his workshop, has come to this point where there's other artists creating the most amazing things from it. I mean, that must make you feel so proud of him.
It does, because now artists can do their own thing, and it's not going to cost them a fortune, because sculpting is going to be expensive, or had been until now. To give you an example, Yvonne shared with me a photograph of a woman who is doing a large piece. And it took me 7 years of being a sculptor to make my first life-size human figure, to make a piece that was 6 feet high in a material that could be sold. So permanent, professional grade material. Ended up being fiberglass, but it took that long. There's a gal who's been using Pal Tiya Premium for 2 months, and she has already created her first 6 foot tall figure.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, wow, you go, girl. And the other part of me is, oh, really?
I'm so
It took me 7 years to walk across glass to get the kind of technology, and you just
did it.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I'm hurt.
I'm hurt and also in awe.
I'm in awe. I want that to happen. I want them to just get on with making big, beautiful things. Now, as Pal Tiya Premium gets out in the world, my personal hope for it is that I can return to doing collaborative pieces. I love bringing a group of people together, pizza, beer, Red Bull, coffee, whatever. Get your friends together, jam on a large piece, but then we get to keep it. And that's the events part, where we all get to have something that will outlast us. And I'm just looking forward to that part.
And what's lovely about it now is you get to play with it on commissions and projects at Weta, because they now love it too.
Yes.
And I think that's the exciting part, is Kim gets to do that performance piece, standing in front of cruise ships every 22 minutes coming through and doing the performance art, and we're getting to share the material with people, which is buckets of fun for her and great for us as well, because there's more people finding out about it, and that's what we want. And we know it isn't for everyone, and we know people have their medium of choice, and that's great. We're just creating a market which is hopefully going to make it far more accessible and fun.
Just make it easy.
Yeah, easier. And Kim always says, if I'd had this material 20 years ago, I'd be a rich woman.
I would not have spent 7 years learning the tech behind making fiberglass. I simply wouldn't go down that route. I would have made large pieces, and by now I would have established my career doing that sort of work. And I would have a very robust portfolio in those pieces now.
Yeah. And I think the kind of business that we're trying to build, I mean, we try and have the best customer service. We are a small team, but we really want people to feel part of our community. And that's why we thought, putting together a podcast, sharing these techniques and tips and things. And I always ask people at the end of this podcast, what are your future plans with your sculpting life? And now that you don't have to give it up. And, that's something to note as well, to amateur artists or people who are just starting out with things, to wear the dust mask and gloves is a barrier to some people. But for a professional artist, like the people Kim has been working with for many years, they're like, I just need a dust mask and gloves. That's it. Because these guys are used to wearing serious equipment to,
hazmat gear.
Hazmat gear to deal with this toxic material. So, this is really exciting a lot of people. And I also ask, what is the number one tip you would give to anyone beginning to use Pal Tiya Premium?
Tinfoil is the best sculpting material there is.
Okay.
Because tinfoil by itself is a great sculpting material. It can act like clay. You can build a life-size human figure in about 3 hours using that material hot glued together. And once you realize that it's that easy and that accessible, Pal Tiya Premium is merely a coating over the top of that initial sculpted core. And that liberates people to being able to make anything they darn well please. So my biggest tip, get some hot glue, get some tinfoil, rock it, man.
And there's a brand that we recommend, and that is the Costco brand, which is Kirkland's heavy duty tinfoil.
Yes.
And we have now found that we can get that in the UK. You can get that, I'm sure you can get it in Australia as well, and New Zealand. But, wherever we are, and there's definitely that Costco Kirkland brand in the US. So we've found that to be one of the best. I mean, we've had lots of tinfoil. Some of them are paper thin.
Yeah.
and some of them are quite robust. And so, experimenting and trying that out will stand you in good stead. And another question, what do you see in your future and also the future of the company?
What do I see in my future? Working with other artists. Trying to get groups of artists together to make pieces that they love to do. You're going to have those schools who create their school emblem.
Yes.
My high school was the Superior Bobcats. I could totally see a large sculpture of a bobcat. I see small, minute theme parks. People expanding into their gardens and making just amazing worlds in their back gardens. I have everyone doing this stuff. It's a chance for people to have all the creative stuff they've always wanted to own, make it themselves, and make their gardens these truly magical worlds with lots of Froud-like sculptures in them.
Excellent. And we love seeing the enthusiasm that our customers so far have been sharing with us and just getting excited about and also starting to geek out over this. So if you ever want to share anything with us, you know where to find us. We are Pal Tiya everywhere. Just type it in, you'll find us. So any parting thoughts or any words of wisdom for people who are perhaps starting out in the sculpting world, or maybe they have got to the point where you were and they think, you know what, I don't want to work with kilns anymore. I don't want to work with this material. Maybe this is something they could work with. Anything that you have to share with them?
Most people who want to start sculpting, most people who want to do this, they've seen something like Star Wars, Brian Froud. They've seen a marvelous movie, whether it's The Bridge to Terabithia or The Dark Crystal. And they've said, wow, I can't ever have any of that. This is a way that people can have the things that are impossible to buy, that you will never have without doing it yourself. And I guess that's what starts people on the path to a life in art, is there has to be something that you want that you cannot achieve through any other means other than doing it yourself. When you're starting to work at any scale, small or large, everything comes with a cost. You want to put something in the mold, start counting in thousands of dollars.
Well, I've really enjoyed learning about your journey, and what has sculpted you into the person that you are today. And I think that many others will be really interested to hear a bit more about you and your story. And we had a bunch of people saying today, Kim is just full of enthusiasm and passion. I'm like, well, she's found something that she can be passionate about.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And we just want to share it. So, go grab some if you're curious at all, and share this podcast with your friends, because, it's opening up a new world for people, which is really exciting.
It is.
So thank you for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Yvonne. This has been fun.
Yes. And we will see you all on the next episode. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. Hey, I have a favour to ask, and it won't take very long. Would you be so kind as to go and leave a review on iTunes? This helps more people find out about our podcast, and as we grow and evolve, we love more listeners like you.
If you want to know more about Pal Tiya and our amazing product, Pal Tiya Premium, then visit www.paltiya.com and join our international fan base.